Karen steals my water? I get sweet revenge. Welcome to HOA Karen Files. Today, I have an extremely captivating and dramatic story that you cannot miss. Have you ever encountered a difficult neighbor who likes to invade others' rights without hesitation? And have you ever imagined that a water hose could turn an entire neighborhood into chaos, leading to an unimaginable struggle for justice? In today's story, we will follow the journey of Miles, an ordinary man leading a peaceful life, until Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the natural water hose, begins to exploit his property without permission. The ending of this story will make you laugh uncontrollably, but it will also make you think about justice and respect in the community. This story is not just a humorous confrontation between two neighbors. It is a great lesson about protecting personal rights and how justice can come in the most unexpected ways. And I promise that after hearing this story, you won't be able to leave halfway. Every step Miles takes will surprise you, and you won't want to miss the crucial moment. If you find this story interesting, don't hesitate to leave a comment below and share your thoughts on the situation Miles faced. Have you ever encountered a difficult neighbor like Karen? We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any interesting stories from HOA Karen Files. This will be where you'll find funny yet thought-provoking tales about community life and unimaginable struggles for justice. We will continue to bring you fresh, engaging, and thought-provoking videos. Hit subscribe now and join us on the journey of discovering surprising stories from HOA Karen Files. Do you believe a water hose can make an entire neighborhood riot? If you think political scandals or workplace arguments are what make a neighborhood buzz, I have a story that will change how you view chaos in the community. Don't be fooled by appearances of peace because it was a water hose that turned my neighborhood into a battlefield. I'm Miles Carter, a freelance graphic designer. After a fire at my old apartment building, I decided to seek peace in a suburban neighborhood where there were no car horns, no blaring music, just fresh air and lush green lawns. I thought this peaceful life would last, but in reality, that was just the beginning of an unexpected story. I live alone, no kids, no pets, and I didn't install an automatic irrigation system for the garden. Yet somehow, the land seemed to have been automatically watered. At this point, I couldn't help but wonder, was someone using my water without me knowing? Have you ever woken up, stepped outside with a cup of coffee in hand, and wondered why your lawn was soaked like it had just been through a tropical rainstorm? Or did you ever see your water bill skyrocket by 400% just because a water hose had an unexpected visitor every morning? One morning, I couldn't believe my eyes. The entire front yard, where there were only a few cacti and some homegrown vegetable beds, was flooded like it had rained all night. But the sky was clear, the sun was shining, and not a drop of rain had fallen. The soil was soggy, puddles of water everywhere, and my water hose was lying on the lawn as if someone had just used it and forgotten to put it away. That was exactly my situation 3 weeks ago when I woke up on a Tuesday morning, grabbed my cup of coffee, and walked outside. The sunlight was shining down on the grass, but instead of the familiar dry scene, I saw a huge puddle. The ground was soggy, puddles everywhere, as if it had rained heavily the night before, although the sky was clear. I stood there in surprise, not understanding what was happening. My water hose was right there, lying on the lawn, as if someone had just used it and forgotten to put it away. But this wasn't just an accidental rainstorm. It was a strange phenomenon I couldn't explain. Soon after, I realized I wasn't the only one affected. My water bill, which had me worried, skyrocketed from $50 to nearly $200 in just 1 month. Things got even stranger when there was nothing in my yard except a withered tomato plant and a rusty barbecue grill. I wondered, was someone using my water without me knowing? Surely someone was. And that someone was Karen, my new neighbor. The next day, I decided to get to the bottom of this. The sudden increase in my water bill made it impossible for me to stay calm. I checked every corner of the yard, examined the hose and the piping system, but there was no sign of any fault or damage. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was secretly using my water. Unable to wait any longer, I began my investigation. I asked some neighbors, and they all confirmed that they hadn't noticed anything unusual. Yet, in my gut, I felt something wasn't right, as this couldn't be a coincidence. And then, on a beautiful Saturday morning, when I had just returned from the market, I caught her red-handed. As I parked in front of my house, I saw a sight that left me speechless. Karen, my new neighbor, was dragging my water hose over the fence, straight to her car. She connected the hose to a car washing kit and began spraying water on her car. All I could do was stand there, sitting in my car, with my hand on the steering wheel, speechless. The scene couldn't have been stranger. Karen, wearing a flowery dress and a wide-brimmed hat, was washing her car in the sunlight as though she were doing something completely legal. And when she noticed I was watching, instead of feeling embarrassed, she just smiled and waved at me in a friendly manner. She casually said, "It's just a little water. We live in a shared community, right? If you think I just stood there and ignored her, you're wrong. This wasn't sharing, this was theft." And I couldn't let her continue taking what didn't belong to her without permission. But what bothered me the most was the way she said it. Like I was part of some shared community, where she thought she had the right to take whatever she wanted without asking. She wasn't just taking my water, she treated it like it was perfectly natural. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, not a communal space where everyone was free to take each other's belongings. The feeling of invasion made it impossible for me to ignore. I tried to stay calm, took a deep breath, and politely asked, "Karen, could you tell me why you're using my water hose without permission?" She didn't feel the least bit embarrassed. On the contrary, she kept her charming smile and responded, "Oh, don't worry, it's not a big deal. I think we should share. Everything in this neighborhood is for everyone." I almost couldn't believe my ears. She was talking about sharing when, in reality, it was outright theft. But I didn't want to cause a scene. I decided to handle this politely but firmly. I stood there for a moment, unable to believe what she had just said. After a few seconds of silence, I calmly replied, "Karen, I think you've misunderstood. My water is not a communal resource, it belongs to me. If you need water, I think you should ask before taking it." And just like that, her door closed without an apology. That's when I realized I had to do something, but I couldn't handle this the usual way. If I just stopped at a mild warning, she would never understand. After the conversation with Karen ended, I stood there for a while, my mind spinning with thoughts. I couldn't keep ignoring this unreasonable behavior, especially when she didn't feel there was anything wrong with it. Maybe I had been a bit soft in my first reminder, but next time, I wouldn't let it slide so easily. I knew one thing for sure: no one can stay silent when their rights are violated. And if I only relied on a mild reminder, Karen would never stop. She would think she could keep taking whatever she wanted without facing any consequences. But this wasn't just about a water hose. It was about boundaries, ownership, and respect in a community. Not wanting to escalate things directly, I decided to go the formal route. I thought the HOA would be the place I could seek support. I took pictures proving her use of my water hose without permission and emailed the HOA, asking them to intervene in the matter. I hoped the HOA, as the neighborhood management body, would take this seriously. I attached the water bill along with photos showing Karen using my hose to wash her car without permission. I also requested the HOA clarify the rules regarding using someone else's property without consent. After a few days of waiting, I received a response from the HOA. However, that response only frustrated me even more. "Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We encourage residents to resolve minor disputes on their own without the HOA's involvement." This response only added fuel to the fire. They did nothing. I had hoped too much from what's called the official procedure. But in reality, the HOA was only concerned with avoiding disputes. Instead of protecting my rights, they suggested I handle the situation peacefully. I couldn't just sit idly by while she continued to exploit my property without any response. After realizing that the HOA had no intention of intervening, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I bought a water hose lock and installed it. I thought that if Karen couldn't access my hose, she would no longer be able to use it whenever she wanted. The next day, I sat inside the house, waiting. When I looked out the window, I saw something unbelievable. The lock had been cut. Someone had clearly used a cutting tool, and I didn't need to look any further to know that it was Karen. Not only that, she continued washing her car with unbelievable confidence. I felt like I was living in a dark comedy, where my efforts to protect my property were being treated as a joke. Karen not only violated the rule once, but she treated it like an entitlement, and that made me feel like I was being mocked. All my efforts only made her more arrogant. At this point, I realized something important. If I wanted Karen to face consequences, I couldn't just rely on direct measures. I needed stronger, undeniable evidence. This wasn't just about protecting my property. It was about making sure such invasive actions wouldn't continue. After a few days of being exploited by Karen with no response from the HOA, I decided it was time to act more creatively. What I had done before, like emailing the HOA or installing the hose lock, clearly wasn't effective. Things even became meaningless when I witnessed Karen continuing to invade my property without any obstruction. But now, I couldn't just stand by. I had to find a way to make her not only realize she was wrong, but also face severe consequences. The only way to make the entire neighborhood aware of the truth, and for me to take action without legal trouble, was to record everything she did. I thought that technology would be the tool to help me get justice. If the HOA wouldn't intervene, then I'd use the power of the internet. I went out and bought a small surveillance camera, one that could be discreetly installed without anyone noticing. It all went quickly, and I installed it right at the location of my water hose. I hid the camera cleverly, only pointing it at the area where Karen usually dragged my hose. I may not be a tech expert, but I knew that as long as I could record her sneaky actions, I would be able to do something bigger. In the following days, I just waited. In fact, I was even more tense than when facing Karen directly because I knew that once I had the evidence in hand, everything would change. I had decided that if she didn't stop, I would have to take stronger action, and I wouldn't be alone in this fight. On the third day after installing the camera, I heard the sound of water. I opened the surveillance screen on my phone, and the footage from the camera came up clearly. Karen was pulling my hose over the fence, just like always, with no suspicion. She even looked around, thinking no one was watching, and then started using the water to wash her shiny car. Immediately, I uploaded the video to my computer and edited it a bit. I wanted to make sure the video was clear and indisputable. Then, I posted it on the neighborhood forum with the title, Karen, the Queen of the Natural Water Hose. I didn't expect the video to spread so fast. Within a few hours, it had been shared across the neighborhood at an incredible speed. Neighbors I used to just greet casually were now watching and sharing the video. They didn't just express surprise, but also voiced their discontent. Comments started to appear, some opposed Karen's actions, while others mocked her overconfidence. The video spread wider, and the wave of anger grew. Interestingly, within a night, the video went beyond the neighborhood, widely shared on social media, and even strangers started getting involved in the story. There were comments like, "If you live in this neighborhood, never let your water hose be exposed. Is Karen running a free car wash service? She'll definitely get into big trouble if she keeps doing this." Less than 24 hours after the video was posted, I saw the views reach the thousands. People were sharing the video and condemning Karen's actions. Some residents even asked why the HOA hadn't intervened yet. One person even suggested installing an automatic sprinkler system in the area to prevent intruders. Everything seemed like an unofficial battle between me and Karen, with the online community as my ally. However, surprisingly, the HOA still didn't make any move. Despite the video being widely shared and witnessed by many, they sent me only a standard email, saying that the issue still needed to be resolved between the residents. The reason being, the HOA didn't want to get involved in small disputes between neighbors. From that point on, I realized that the HOA only truly acted when there was a bigger complaint or if it affected the neighborhood's reputation, but with the stolen water hose, they didn't care. My story with Karen had reached a point where it couldn't continue the normal way anymore. After her video went viral online, I not only felt satisfied with the support from the community, but also realized something important. Karen would never understand the seriousness of using someone else's property without permission. It was time for a lesson in real justice, a lesson that Karen would never forget. And justice wouldn't just be about punishing her. It had to be sweet, flavorful, and certainly with a bit of an unbearable stench. One day, while driving past a construction site near my house, I happened to see a huge wastewater tank being transported. An idea popped into my head, a perfect plan that made me wonder why I hadn't thought of it earlier. Imagine the scene, a water hose that, when turned on, would spray hellish holy water. The stench would be strong enough to make an army disappear in 5 seconds. I didn't rush to the construction site, but cautiously made an unofficial deal with the workers there. After a few chats, I gathered enough information and bought a tank of wastewater from them at a price they considered a bargain, a few dollars and a thank you from me. Next, I returned home, gathered all the equipment, and installed a secret valve into my water system. This valve could switch the water from clean to wastewater when I activated the remote switch. Surely, Karen would never dare wash her car for free again. The next morning, like a predator waiting, I stood inside my house looking out, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the surveillance camera. Sure enough, Karen had no idea that today would be an unforgettable day. With her smile as bright as ever, she confidently dragged my hose as usual, unaware. And then, the water began to spray. Not clean water, but thick, dark water, with a stench so foul that it made the entire neighborhood stop, drawn in by a fragrance that could only be called the scent of justice. It was unbelievable. The water shot out like a fiery spray from hell. Karen's garden sprinkler system was never prepared for such a sight. Karen stood there in shock, not knowing what was happening, as the dirty water sprayed on her and her car. She stepped back, trying to turn off the hose, but the wastewater kept spraying directly at her, soaking her like a drowned rat, with a smell that was indescribable. The smell didn't just panic her, it made the nearby children run in terror. The children, who had never seen anything like this, screamed and ran away, with one even shouting, "Mom, what is that smell?" The scene couldn't have been more humorous as Karen slipped on the wet ground and fell straight into the lawn chair. She staggered and flailed, as if trying to escape from a real chemical disaster. The neighbors, who had witnessed her trespassing on my property, couldn't hold back their laughter anymore. Phones started recording, and everyone was capturing every moment of this justice-filled revenge. The neighbors around the scene began to scramble to record the event. Some filmed, others laughed uncontrollably, and even one neighbor chimed in with a chuckling voice. "Karen is getting a free car wash service from our neighborhood." They sent the videos to each other, posted them online, and soon, everyone in the neighborhood knew about the scent of justice incident. The story became the talk of the town, and Karen couldn't resist the humiliation anymore. After being drenched in wastewater in a perfect, unforgettable spectacle, Karen couldn't stay silent anymore. As the neighbors began to laugh and post videos online, she launched a noisy counterattack that I never expected. Instead of accepting the truth, Karen sued me for biological assault. No kidding, she really filed a lawsuit with an incredibly creative reason. She accused me of intentionally polluting the air and creating a biological hazard for her, claiming that the wastewater could cause diseases, although I'm pretty sure it only ruined her image. She said I had violated her personal rights and caused a biological disaster in the neighborhood. Not only did she sue me in court, but Karen also filed a complaint with the HOA, urging them to punish me for actions that didn't align with community standards. At first, I could only shake my head and laugh. I couldn't believe she could be serious enough to turn a humorous situation into such a serious lawsuit. Soon after, the HOA, not wanting to attract unnecessary attention and avoid getting involved in the lawsuit, sent me a penalty notice for disrupting the peace and disturbing the neighborhood order. Naturally, I wasn't too surprised, as the HOA, as always, preferred to avoid complicated situations. They didn't seem to care who was right or wrong. They just wanted to maintain peace. But I'm not the type of person to remain passive in situations like this. Instead of bowing my head and accepting the fine, I did something Karen and the HOA didn't expect. I appealed. I prepared a thick file with all the necessary evidence to defend myself and prove that I was completely right. Not only did I have the video capturing Karen's water theft, but I also had water bills showing the huge cost I had to pay because of her actions. In addition, I also included a copy of the HOA regulations, which clearly stated, prohibited entry into another person's property without permission, especially the use of another person's property without consent. With such a complete file, no one could continue to side with Karen. Not only did I have solid evidence, but I also had a valid reason to file a lawsuit against her, and the HOA had failed to fulfill its responsibility to protect residents. After a week of tension, the HOA called an emergency meeting to address the issue. The whole neighborhood had heard about this battle, and perhaps never before had the residents paid such close attention to the HOA. People started sending emails supporting me. Letters from other residents expressing support and demanding the HOA act fairly began appearing. They started comparing Karen's video with the HOA's rules, and everyone realized that she had violated them severely. When the meeting ended, the The result was more surprising than expected. The HOA decided to fine Karen. Not only that, they revoked her voting rights in the HOA for 6 months and required her to amend her behavior if she didn't want to face further consequences. She was penalized for not only disturbing me, but also causing trouble for the whole neighborhood. Karen had completely failed. She not only lost her voting rights in the HOA, but she also lost face in front of the entire neighborhood. No one here supported her anymore, and all that remained was the humiliation and awkwardness when she realized that her actions had not only been exposed online, but also completely boycotted by the residents. With Karen fined and stripped of her decision-making powers in the HOA, the atmosphere in the neighborhood returned to peace. People now knew that if you infringed on someone else's rights, there would be consequences. Other residents began inviting me to barbecue parties, and not only that, a few even gave me a new hose to replace the one that had been misused before. My story with Karen had become a lesson about respecting others' property and ensuring that wrongful actions would have consequences. Now, my neighborhood was no longer a place where anyone could do whatever they wanted. From now on, anyone who wanted free water would surely think twice. After all the turmoil and embarrassment, Karen ultimately couldn't take it anymore. She moved out quietly, without saying goodbye or offering any explanation. The whole neighborhood just looked at each other and sighed in relief, as if everything had returned to normal, although a part of us felt the absence of a villain in this story. The new family that moved into Karen's house was a young couple, kind and polite, completely the opposite of the previous owner. On their first day, they brought a homemade cake to greet the neighbors. They smiled, chatted amiably, and immediately won everyone over. It was a breath of fresh air for this neighborhood, which had been tense due to Karen's presence. Looking at them, I couldn't help but feel that the neighborhood had finally returned to the true meaning of community. Everything seemed to have ended, but not long after, I received an email from a resident in the neighborhood where Karen had moved to. The email subject read, "She's using someone else's hose again. Any plans for a counterattack?" That question made me laugh. Part of me felt satisfied because, finally, not only I but also others in the neighboring areas had started noticing Karen's wrongdoings. It turned out, Karen still hadn't learned her lesson. She continued acting as though nothing had changed, still using other people's hoses covertly, this time in her new neighborhood. I didn't respond immediately. In that moment, I felt like an ordinary man facing a new version of Karen. However, instead of feeling frustrated or angry, I decided to do something humorous and somewhat cold. I sat down at my desk, opened my computer, and drafted a reply. The response I sent was simple, but also quite pointed. "I'm sending you the full technical diagram. Good luck." And so, Karen's story began a new chapter in another neighborhood. But this time, it wouldn't be me dealing with her unacceptable actions. It would be the residents there. After all, I knew that justice wasn't just about me winning again. Justice had passed through all the nooks and crannies, and in the end, Karen would realize that no one could freely exploit others without paying the price. After everything that had happened, I couldn't help but look back and reflect on the valuable lessons I had learned throughout this journey. In the end, the story of Karen was not just about protecting personal property or finding a way to punish a wrongdoing, but about ensuring we protect our own boundaries. I don't want to say that I defeated Karen just for revenge. What I wanted was to restore respect in a community, to help this neighborhood realize that every action has consequences, whether it's a small misstep or a major violation. Sometimes, what we call justice isn't a glamorous ending, but a balance, a way to bring everything back into proper order. For me, victory wasn't about bringing down an enemy, but about maintaining peace and protecting my rights without harming anyone. That's why I always try not only to solve the problem, but also to leave a lesson for everyone around me. And I hope that my story can serve as a reminder for anyone facing similar challenges, that it's never too late to stand up for your own rights. If you like this story and want to follow more humorous, bizarre, yet meaningful situations about community issues, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, HOA Karen Files. We not only tell entertaining stories, but also bring valuable lessons about life, fairness, and how we can build a strong, respectful community. Click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any interesting stories. Join me as we share funny moments, learn from mistakes, and work together to create a stronger community. Thank you for following this story, and I hope to see you in the next videos of HOA Karen Files, where we explore interesting tales about community and justice.